Thank you, Donald, and good evening, everybody. Well, I'm here in Manchester, and this is part of my election roadshow, which this week will see me not just here, but also in Birmingham, Newcastle, and in Glasgow. And the idea is to get you involved in this debate. Now, whether you know what I do or what LBC does, then perhaps this is your chance to test us out, get involved, and have your say. And we'll give you the opportunity to speak about this general election, about any issue you feel the public need to talk about. So we'll kick off here in Manchester, the heart of the Northwest, where there are 75 parliamentary constituencies. And in many ways, the Northwest represents the overall Brexit vote that took place on the 23rd of June last year. 1.7 million voters here voted to remain. 2 million voters here voted to leave. 46-54. So as I say, roughly in line with the rest of the country. The big cities voting remain, Manchester 60%, Liverpool 58%, but the smaller market towns and the rural areas being strongly on the other side. At the moment, Labour hold 48 seats in this region, the Conservatives 23, and the LibDems 2. And of course, there are lots and lots of marginal seats in this region. But what was going to be the issue that decided how people were going to vote? Well, we were told the whole election was about Brexit. Nothing else was even going to be discussed. Well, I think we can say with some confidence that all of that has changed. And I'm tonight debating the issue of U-turns. You know, is it actually a wise leader that goes for a U-turn if they can clearly see a policy isn't working, or is it a sign of weakness? And I asked that question of you in this context. Just 4 days ago, we had the launch of the Tory manifesto, and there was a big row, if you remember, over social care costs. So up to £100,000 of people's property, assets or savings would be protected. But for people receiving social care at home, they were then going to have to start paying a contribution. But, interestingly, there was no upper cap on how much that expenditure could total. And we had people ringing into this show last Thursday saying, I was going to vote Conservative, but I'm disgusted. I think it's a tax on death. It's a tax on dementia. It's a disincentive for people to save. And clearly, over the course of the weekend, the opinion polls have showed a bit of a shift. No longer are the Tories 19 points, 20 points in the lead. You know, it's down to 13 or 14. Still a very significant lead, but the mood music that came from the back of that manifesto launch wasn't particularly positive. And I have to say myself that I can never remember in my lifetime a manifesto pledge being changed or U-turned during a general election campaign itself. So is it a sign of wisdom? Is it a sign of weakness? I have to say, for my own part, I do think that Theresa May has U-turned now on quite a lot of things. Not just this, but many other issues. Mind you, Jeremy Corbyn, of course, has spent 33 years in Parliament being in favour of Brexit, and now the referendum wasn't, and Jeremy Corbyn wanted to get rid of Trident, but he accepts a party manifesto that doesn't have it in it. So I suppose in some ways, all political leaders are forced at different times to change their opinions. Although I would say, and whether this is to my credit or not, I'm not sure that I U-turned on anything in the general election of 2015, but that's just me. But Theresa May has performed quite a dramatic U-turn. So if you think, look, actually, she's got this right, she's showed she's able to listen to the voters, then call me on 0345 60 60 973. If you think the U-turn really sends a message that, in fact, they're all over the place and they're following opinion rather than leading it, well, text on 84850. Or if you're now beginning to despair of the entire election campaign, then tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC. Get involved. Call, text, tweet, Facebook message me. And why don't we hear the Prime Minister at her press conference in Wales today?
We have not changed the principles that we set out in the manifesto. We're very clear about the principles on which this system will operate. What we have done is clarified that in the Green Paper, which will be a consultation document, we will have a limit, upper limit, absolute limit on the amount that people will pay for care.
Well, the manifesto did talk about a proposed green paper, and perhaps that was her way out, in a sense, today. But nowhere did that manifesto talk about an upper cap. And indeed, when Conservative ministers were being interviewed over the weekend, they were making the point, look, actually, if you leave an inheritance of £100,000 to your children, isn't that actually perfectly reasonable? So it is a big fundamental change. I'm minded to say that the lady is for turning. And I wonder what Mohammed in Bolton, just down the road, makes of this. Was she wise, Mohammed, to do this, or is it a sign of weakness?
Hi, Nigel.
Hello.
Hi, how you doing? You're right.
I'm well. What do you think?
Nigel, look, here's what I think. I think we all know this election has come about because of Brexit.
Uh-huh.
I think Brexit has basically been, or should I say, the British public have been sold a pup. They've been sold a dream. They've been told that this is going to happen, etc., etc., etc. From the back of that, this election is going to happen, and what really scares me, and it does scare me, is that I look at all the parties. I'm a capitalist, by the way.
Right.
A socialist capitalist, call it. I do. I'm not just all about making money. I have my own business.
So Mohammed, would you call yourself a sort of free marketeer?
Yes, absolutely, 100%.
Okay.
100%. So what scares me is I look at all our political leaders, and what scares me is that the leaders, including the people that they're surrounded by, have come up with policies and are making decisions which are bad decisions. It's scary. It really is scary. If a businessman was to run a business this way, then we'd have major problemms.
Yes, and if you had shareholders to answer to, Mohammed, you probably wouldn't last very long, would you? But let's say, Mohammed, that the decision not to have an upper cap on social care at home, let's say that was a bad decision. In the light of a bad decision, was it wise 4 days later to effectively reverse it?
Look, here's the way I see it. First of all, it was a bad policy anyway, because as anybody who bought their houses or, worked hard to buy a house, the biggest asset most people in this country have is their house. And
yes.
what she did, and what they did was they came up with a policy which basically said, look, this is the crazy thing. The majority of you, your biggest asset is your house, and here's what we're going to do. We're going to let you keep 100 grand, and then we're going to take the lot.
Well, Mohammed, if though, Mohammed, you're in residential care, of course, they could have taken, your savings down to an even lower level. So, there is a little bit of give and take on this. So, Mohammed, they made a mistake. Let's just agree. They made a political mistake. They've reversed it. Is it wise to reverse that mistake within 4 days?
Yes, if you want to win the election and try and get some of your core supporters back.
Right, so will she? Will she, Mohammed? Yes. Will she? Because I had people ringing on this show last Thursday saying, I've been Tory all my life, I'm 80 years old, I've worked like hell since the 1950s, I've saved up, I own a modest property, I want to leave it to future generations, and I'm not going to vote Tory. Do you think with what she's done today, she'll get that kind of voter back?
Yes, she will.
She will?
Yes, she will. And I'll tell you the reason why. Because if you look at what Labour is doing, and if you look at what Labour and the LibDems are proposing, that's even more scary, right? However, now I'm kind of 50-50, and the thing that's going through my mind is basically this. And I've always voted Tory, whether I've agreed it, whether I've disagreed with some of their policies, whatever it may be. I've always, voted Tory. And the thought that's going through my head right now is basically this, that if I was, the European leaders, and if Theresa May and her party came into power, I would basically make sure that she would get a really, really hard time, purely and simply because of personalities, right? It's nothing to do with common sense. Now it's got very, very personal.
Well, yeah, but Mohammed, we'll get to that in the next few weeks, I promise you. But I'm going to have to stop you there. Thank you for the call, Mohammed from Bolton. And I'm keen to get callers from other parts of the Northwest. And it may be, in many cases, the first time you've really heard much about LBC. We've had advertising vans going around Manchester today. And, of course, I want to hear from people with all political backgrounds. And the European negotiations, well, a week after this general election, we will start the negotiations in Brussels. I'm quite pleased on one point that last week I said to Mr. Barnier, I said, if you make a ridiculous sort of €100 billion charge, we'll have to walk. And David Davis over the weekend said, look, they've got to be reasonable or we'll walk. And today Monsieur Barnier was saying, no, we don't want the Brits to walk. We are going to make sure we're reasonable. Maybe it's a straw in the wind that we're heading in the right direction. I don't know. Kumar in Ealing, good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Was she wise to U-turn?
Today, in my view, humble view, May debased politics on three levels. First of all, she showed how opportunistic they are, that they can go from a principled position on Friday where they're arguing that we want to treat everyone with fairness, i.e. residential care versus domiciliary care, and I almost bought it. It seemed a very logical, and the key word is fairness. And she's completely flip-flopped, just showing what an opportunistic party they are, and I'm sorry to say they're back to the nasty party. Second thing is she debased politics by denigrating Corbyn. Now, to me, politics has always been about your ideas versus my ideas, your opinions versus my opinions. Not about you, not about me. And whilst, Mr. Farage, I completely and 180% diametrically opposite to your politics, I respect you, and I think you're a formidable politician in the same way I could say Corbyn. The third thing I would say, may I make a point on immigration?
Yeah, quickly, yeah.
Okay. Nowhere in the Tory manifesto did they say how they're going to pay for, assuming for one moment that they can get immigration down from 300,000 to 100,000, that means we're going to lose 200,000 people who are paying taxes. Now, assuming everyone of those 200 pays £5,000 tax, that's a 10 billion hole that they haven't accounted for.
Actually, Kumar, that is a slightly separate debate. But remember, there are some people that come to Britain as immigrants who make a net contribution. Equally, there are plenty that come to Britain who do not make a net contribution because the costs of the health service and everything else far outweigh the tax they pay.
But Kumar, one final point?
Go on quickly.
Okay. 30 years ago, there were 15 people in work to generate the taxes for every pensioner. Today, that 15 is down to 5, and in 10 years' time, it'll be down to 3. In Germany, it's already 1-to-1, which is why Merkel allowed. My question to you, sir, is that do we then tax the 3 more, or do we reduce the benefits of the 1, or do we need a balanced, as I spoke to you the other day, balanced immigration policy?
We need a balanced immigration policy, Kumar, that brings in highly skilled people who speak the language, integrate, and pay much more into the system than they ever take out of it. Kumar, I thank you. Kumar there saying that he feels that Theresa May has debased politics by what she's done today. Right. Yes, we're in Manchester tonight, part of my election roadshow, going around the country. It's Birmingham tomorrow, Newcastle the night after that, and Glasgow on Thursday. And we're taking LBC out round the country and saying to people who may not know the station, here's your chance to get involved. We speak to people from all political views. And the big debate is, Theresa May has performed a pretty dramatic U-turn just 4 days after the Conservative manifesto. And the question is that an act of wisdom, or is it an act of weakness? Now, one idea here is, Nigel, a credible alternative to the dementia tax is a 10% tax on all properties to be invested with a profits ring fence for a care fund. That comes from Fawn in Bromley. Fawn, the idea that all of us would put 10% of the value of our properties into the government's hands for them to invest on our behalf, given the track record of things they get wrong, I don't think that one's going to fly somehow. Nigel, why won't people dare say that Theresa May really wants to lose the election? Theresa May is deliberately making herself unpopular to keep us in the EU. Sorry, Don't buy into that. Too conspiratorial. Nigel, this U-turn over social funding just goes to show what a weak Prime Minister Theresa May is. I don't trust her, so from now on, I'm going to vote Corbyn. And that's from Paul here in Manchester. Well, we've had people telling us that it looks weak, but Mohammed from Bolton said actually he thought it would help her win back some of those voters who were ringing in last Thursday very, very angry. People who had been encouraged to be thrifty, who'd saved money and did not like the idea there was no upper cap on the costs of social care at home. Let's go to Ali in Barnsley. Good evening. Do you think she was wise to perform this U-turn?
Hi, good evening, Nigel.
Good evening.
I think it's not a sign of wisdom. It certainly is not. I think, in my opinion, it's a sign of lack of principle, because it's not certainly wise to put a policy document together full of these half-cooked policies where members of your own party, the senior members of your own party, are criticising some of the key pledges in that document. And I think, you couldn't make this stuff up, could you? The irony there in a chapter where it says, under the title of, the good that the government can do, in the same document, you got stuff like the dementia tax. I mean, it's not really wise, it's not really principled to make money out of other people's suffering. I mean, you would expect the Tories to treat the grey vote as a sort of a consumer sort of group, but this, I think they've got.
Well, I think Ali, the thing is that actually George Osborne and David Cameron did. I speculated on Thursday that Theresa May was doing this because she thought that grey vote, as you call it, was actually in the bag anyway. And maybe what's happened over the weekend is she's realised that it's not, and that the election that she wanted to be dominated by Brexit is now actually today being dominated by something else entirely.
Yeah, absolutely. I think she's got it wrong. It's not a sign of maturity. This image that she was presenting of herself, of this mature sort of technocratic sort of politician who would steer us out of the EU, and this mature leadership that she was presenting has just, the image is breaking down. And I think she's not, in my opinion, she's not a leader. She's not. She talks about strong and stable leadership. Never mind strong leadership, but she's not a leader. She's a follower, and she's a follower of the public opinion. She follows devoutly her.
I have to say, Ali,
real
I have to say,
master, who is
I'm struggling.
Crosby.
I'm struggling to counter you here. I really am struggling quite hard. And in fact, this is not the first thing she's U-turned on, is it? Because, during the referendum, she said staying in the European Union would make us a safer country, and she's changed on that. She repeatedly said there'd be no general election, and there was one. Now, people are allowed to change their mind, Ali. They are allowed to do that. Of course they are in politics. And through life, we all, at times, change our opinions. But to change something that was in a manifesto with just 17 days to go before voting, I think is unprincipled. Kumar, before the break, said that he thought she debased politics. Would you put it as strongly as that?
I think not as strongly as that, but I think these U-turns and these changes in policy are becoming part of their British conservative DNA, because this is not the first time we're witnessing this. We've been witnessing this in the past 7 years. After every single budget, they've had to back down on some of the policies.
Yeah. Well, of course, that's right, because her first budget there was a dramatic U-turn on as well. Ali, are you normally inclined to be a Conservative voter?
No, I'm not. I'm not a voter, as I said to you earlier before.
Okay.
I'm not a voter, and I've never sympathised with the Conservative Party.
Right.
Not at all.
And so nothing's going to make you vote in this election, no?
Definitely not. No.
No, fine, Ali. I tell you what, you won't be on your own, Ali. The turnout is going to be lower than most people can even imagine, in my view. Annie in Hastings, are you one of those people who thinks it's an unprincipled move? It shows weakness. It shows opportunism. Or do you think she thought she'd made an honest mistake and now was the time to change?
Well, Nigel, first of all, could I say how privileged I am to speak to you?
Well, that's very lovely of you. Thank you.
Oh, my God, Nigel Farage. I can't believe it.
Right. Well, now we've got... Lovely though that is, I want you to tell me what you think about Mrs May's actions, please.
Well, what I think is this, because I'm actually a Conservative voter since 1980s.
Yep.
I was a young thing in 1980s when Margaret Thatcher come to power.
Yep.
And I was a young hippie, you know, doing my little thing. And a woman come to power. Yeah, let's support Margaret Thatcher. It didn't all work out, but a lot of it did work out. And what I would like to say is it's okay in politics to change your mind. Like the press call it U-turn, U-turn, U-turn. But it's okay to listen to the people. Like if UKIP put in a policy, right, and they got a feedback from the public that it's not going to happen, it's okay for you to go back and say, okay, we've listened to you, and now we're going to still project that policy, but we're going to change it to this, and this.
I completely understand, Annie. I completely
listen to people.
I get what you're saying, but equally, my experience is this. In the last general election, I did the big leaders debates. I made a point about health tourism. I said I thought it was outrageous that anybody could come here from anywhere in the world, get an HIV test, and then if they were HIV positive, get drugs to treat it that would cost up to £25,000 per person. And that what was happening was that HIV treatment for British taxpayers actually was being diminished because of it. Now, I met Annie with the most astonishing wall of abuse. I got abuse from Cameron, I got abuse from Clegg, I got abuse from Miliband, obviously, and everybody else, Nicola Sturgeon, you name it, and much of the press. Do you know what, Annie? The fact that short term I was getting heat over it didn't change my view that actually, unfortunate though it is that there are HIV sufferers all over the world, our job in this country and the National Health Service was to put the priorities of our own people first. And do you know what, Annie? I toughed it out. You did tough it out. And I was right to. And I was right to tough it out because actually, but 4 or 5 days had gone by and the Daily Mail, who were not being nice to me in the campaign, had a big opinion poll that showed well over the half the country thought I was right to have raised the issue. So, Annie, I get what you're saying. There are times when people need to listen. But I think, my view, Annie, is this is a knee-jerk response. And actually, if she believed in the policy last Thursday, she ought to have stuck to it. That's my view, Annie.
Yeah. Can I just say something now, please, Nigel?
Of course.
Right. What I think is this, right? I've been a Conservative voter since Margaret Thatcher. And I think in politics, we're like blind. We're like, we follow some lights.
Yeah,
now, all of a sudden, I'm in my 70s now, Nigel.
Annie, are you still going to vote Conservative in this election?
No.
You're not. So
I'm voting UKIP. But I have to wait for their referendum to come out. Or no, not their referendum. Their
manifesto
to come out in Wednesday.
That's right. Annie, I'm going to have to go. Thank you for your call. Fascinating call. So I'm still looking for callers from all over the country, especially if you're here in the Northwest. Do call us. LBC are in town, and I want to hear from people across the whole country with all political views. OK, the Green Party launched their manifesto today, and they want another referendum on our membership of the European Union at the end of the process, and they kind of think that the younger generation in this country has been betrayed. So they felt pretty strongly about that. But the most eye-catching, I think, of all of the proposals, and bear in mind the Green Party have two leaders, co-leaders. They have Caroline Lucas and Jonathan Bartley. And he talked today about the Green Party's proposal to scrap all existing student debt, by which I mean not just stopping people having to pay tuition fees going on from here, but scrapping all the amounts that people currently owe. Estimates on that are that it would cost something like £14 billion. The Green Party, who are putting up 475 candidates in this election, and of course they do have that seat in Brighton that Caroline Lucas has won and held at a subsequent election. In other election news, there was an election poster launched at the weekend, a LibDem poster. Don't know whether you saw it online, but we'll make sure that LBC's Facebook page and website has it. And it was a picture of my face with Theresa May's hair, Theresa May's sort of coat stroke dress, and a set of a pearl necklace. So it's my face, it's Theresa May's body, outside number 10. It's from the Liberal Democrats, and it says, vote her, get him. And that has led within the Green Party. It's backfired. There is uproar in the Lib Dem from their chairman of their trans community. And I have to say, I can't quite work this out. I mean, I'm not even a candidate, and I still finish up in the middle of an election row. So there are things that have been going on over the last couple of days, and you may have noticed Donald Trump on his first tour, starting off in Saudi Arabia, currently in Israel today, and a very strong speech saying we want to work with Muslim countries, but you've got to drive the bad guys out of your own places of worship. Interesting. Martin in Glasgow. We're going to be in Glasgow on Thursday, but for now, Martin, what do you make? What do you make of Theresa May's U-turn? Was it the right, wise thing to do?
Good evening, Nigel. As far as I'm concerned, is utter incompetence. When I heard it the other day there, I says political suicide. Now that they've U-turned, how does it look to the public now? They can't make up their mind. It's ill thought out. Could this be in other policies? There's been other situation during this campaign. By the way, may I say I'm a Conservative stroke UKIP voter. I know it's unusual, but I am. And there was a thing about fox hunting. I thought to myself, why bring that up now? And then there was the immigration thing, still promising they'll get it down to hundreds of thousands.
Tens of thousands.
Or tens of thousands.
Yeah.
Well, and I thought to myself, my head was in my hands at that point. And then when I heard this last Thursday, that was the final straw. Now, I do realise in the social care you do need to get things under control. You do need to manage things. But now, in order to win this election, is not the appropriate time to make yourself out to be incompetent. Absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, but what she's done, Martin, and I do just wonder. I mean, obviously Linton Crosby is there behind the scenes doing the big picture stuff. I do actually wonder, in terms of the day-to-day management of what they say and what they do in the media, I do wonder whether maybe the people around her are somewhat inexperienced and simply haven't been in this kind of election campaign before. But, Martin, she wanted to fight this election on Brexit, didn't she? She wanted to make Brexit the central issue. And all the while, Brexit was the central issue. She had an absolutely huge, commanding lead in the polls.
Well, that's another point I thought, Nigel. I know you discounted one of the person that sent in saying it's a conspiracy theory, but even I thought, this lady's a Remainer, and are they trying to do things to not win an election, which is incredible to think a political party I know would do that, but it's become so ridiculous.
Do you know, Martin, if you and I were sitting in a bar in Glasgow, and even downwind of a few, I would still find that very difficult to believe. I think she wants to be Prime Minister with a big majority more than anything else. I think her motivation is career success, and that matters to her far more than policy. That's what I think, Martin.
Well, I think you could be right, Nigel, but the point is at the moment it's not going that way. I don't think they'll get this wonderful landslide that's happening because it's an apparent or perception that's going on with the public of incompetence. It's absolutely ludicrous to me. And it'll be interesting to see, obviously, what happens on the 9th of June, but really and truly, investigation should be made here. In fact, anybody with any common sense can see this has been utter nonsense.
OK, no, Martin, couldn't be clearer. They are incompetent, says Martin in Glasgow. On text, I get, Nigel, a person changes her mind. Good, says Kate. Nigel, I think all the manifestos were rushed through. Corbyn should think about U-turning on some of his Fantasyland policies. There's nothing wrong with politicians changing their minds. It takes guts, says Graham. Yes, Graham, but when you've got a general election 17 days away and you only issued this policy 4 days ago, maybe Martin in Glasgow is right. Maybe it is sheer incompetence, or maybe it's just a knee-jerk reaction to suddenly taking a lot of stick. Josie says, given my life experience, the inheritance cap is an insult. There we are. What does Ray in Stoke-on-Trent think of this story? Ray, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. Top man, I voted for you since you came into being, matey. I've met you once up Hanley and Stoke-on-Trent here, and I think you're a great bloke. But you don't believe in conspiracy theories. I think Theresa May is trying to throw the election, and the biggest joke any leader of the Conservatives ever told was David Cameron when he said, we're all in it together. He meant all the politicians are in it together, Nigel. I believe that, mate, because 70% of the politicians believe in staying in Europe, and about 30%, if that, don't want to...
Oh, well, that certainly was true, Ray, but, I mean, look, the opinion polling we saw last week showed that just 22% of people now really feel bitter about the referendum result and would like the chance to reverse it, and 68% either think it's great or think we should just get on with it. And I think in the face of that, it's very difficult for the politicians to really go against us, isn't it?
Yeah, it is difficult for them, but where there's a will, there's a way with politicians, I'm afraid. I don't trust any of them.
I can tell. There's a very healthy dose of cynicism from Stoke-on-Trent there. But on the social care point, Ray, I mean, did she make a terrible mistake last week?
She did. I think she did, yes. Like, there's a lot of people who have worked hard, who've bought the house, who've even bought the council houses, and some of them, sky-high prices now, particularly down south.
Yes.
And she's just taking it all off them. But it's good that she's done a U-turn, because it shows she's listening.
Right, OK, Ray, so your point is that in this particular case, she made a big mistake, and U-turning was an act of wisdom as opposed to an act of weakness, yeah?
I think she's trying to chuck it.
Right. Well, Ray, thank you. Well, that's 3 people so far have suggested to me that Theresa May wants to throw the election because she really wants us to stay part of the European Union. I am struggling with this. I've been accused of all sorts of things over the years. I've been accused of being a conspiracy theorist. I'm not yet buying in to this one. Adam in Leeds, tell me, what do you think? Was she wise to change her policy on this? Good evening.
How are you? Good?
I'm very well, but I'm just fascinated to see what people think about this.
Yeah, well, I'm traditionally a Conservative voter normally, but I'm going to have to vote for Jeremy Corbyn. So I'm a bit out of breath. I've just run up the stairs. I'm going to have to vote Jeremy Corbyn this time because I feel his manifesto is the strongest of the parties. I think Mrs May has made a U-turn, but politicians are elected on mandates. She hasn't specifically got one. However, she's listening to public opinion, and she wants to obviously scrap this tax on all people, essentially social care taxation. And I think that's personally a good thing, but obviously, she's made several U-turns for Brexit, notably the national insurance rise.
Yep.
I think there was another one I forget. I think...
But Adam, let me just put this to you. That what we've heard for the last 3 weeks, over and over and over, is strong and stable leadership. I mean, they keep parroting out this phrase until many of us actually are getting bored with it. And what I'm asking you as a traditional Conservative voter is, are these actions, and you've listed them to me, not the other way round, are these actions, are these U-turns consistent with strong and stable leadership?
I would have to say, and I don't normally agree with you, Nigel, there are some things that I do agree with you on, and there are some things that I don't agree with you on, but that's democracy, and I genuinely believe doing things in the national interest, rightly or wrongly, that's a separate matter. In this instance, I think, personally, Mrs May isn't showing strong and stable leadership, and then yet the Conservatives have the audacity to say Jeremy Corbyn is not strong and secure, or stable, sorry.
Yeah.
I think, she's not shown strong and stable leadership.
Well, and actually, Adam, today she was saying Jeremy Corbyn said nasty things about me, and he was horrid. So we had to change the policy. Very odd, really, isn't it?
Well, the pot called the kettle black there, because he's the nasty party. But then again, Nigel, I would have to say that, Jeremy Corbyn, I'm from Leeds, and he came into Morley, he went into neighbouring Bradford. The man has been portrayed by the mainstream media as somebody who's weak.
Yeah.
But, I mean, nobody's really saying Theresa May is weak.
Adam, one of the things I said last week whatever mistakes Corbyn's associates have made, and one or two on this radio station, LBC, but he himself actually is loving the campaign. He was speaking at a rock concert yesterday in Manchester to 60,000 people. He's enjoying it. Adam, I thank you. Earlier I mentioned one of the candidates in the Brighton Pavilion seat earlier, and I want to let you know the others who are standing in that seat. Ian Buchanan for UKIP, Solomon Curtis for Labour, Emma Warren for the Conservatives, and Nick Yeomans as an independent. So I'm still appealing to callers from the Northwest to get involved in this show live here from Manchester, but I'm getting calls actually from all over the north of England and the whole of England. Right now, you're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 7. This election is not just about Brexit anymore, because we're talking about social care costs, and my guess is we're going to go on talking about them for some time. 4 days after the Conservative manifesto, at which there was to be no upper limit on what the costs that could be charged an individual against their property for social care at home were introduced. We're now told, actually, there's a U-turn and there is going to be a cap. And I've got callers telling me that's wise, that is sensible, that is listening to the public. Other callers, a little bit more sceptical. Luke in Derby says to me, it wasn't that long ago that the Tories U-turned on tax increases for the self-employed. It's one U-turn after another. Seems far from the strong and stable government she keeps on going on about. I wonder what Andy in Nottingham makes of this debate. Andy, good evening.
Evening, Nigel. Pleasure to talk to you. One of the only politicians I've ever known answer the question asked of him. Brilliant.
Well, that's very sweet of you. And I have to say, Andy, whether it's because I was right and I'd thought it through, or whether because I'm just simply pig-headed, I didn't U-turn on anything in the general election of 2015. In fact, when they criticised me, I just doubled down and kept on going. But that's
because you're from the real world and you're not a professional politician. I think that's what it is.
Yeah, I mean, doesn't necessarily mean it was the right approach, but that was that was how I did things. Yeah. But what about the Prime Minister, Andy? What do you make of it?
Well, I can't understand how all political parties seem to surround themselves with idiots who don't understand the common man, and it's the common man's vote they're after. Yes. She seems to have got this manifesto completely wrong. I mean, even the winter fuel allowances are a mess, the social care's a mess. Gordon Brown got his 10p tax completely wrong. Osborne got his pasty tax in a mess. And they've got thousands of civil servant advisors and political advisors. Even your guy in Stoke, I mean, what a mess he made of that. The Greens can't even find a leader. They have to have two. It goes on and on.
Well, no, they think it's more democratic having two leaders, you know.
Well,
but I mean,
why not
Andy...
have 22 then?
Well, right. But Andy, I mean, OK, let's say you've got a retired pensioner couple living in Surrey. The house is worth £2.5 million. They've got a big pension coming in. They've got big stock market savings and dividends coming in. Is it entirely unreasonable that the government should say these people really shouldn't qualify for a winter fuel allowance?
No, they should just have it, but it should just be added into the pension. Then it's taxable, so the government will get half of it back straight away.
Right, OK. No, I think that's a very good idea. The simple way of doing it, yes, is you put it onto the pension, and if you qualify for tax, you pay tax. And if you no, I agree with that. Andy, that's a very, very practical view. Love to hear what other callers think about that idea, because that would be a good way of doing it. So you're pretty... I mean, Andy, do you feel like voting for anybody, given your analysis of the current political scene? And we appear to have lost... We've lost Andy. I was enjoying that, and Andy went. Let's go to Scott in Southend-on-Sea. Scott, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. What about the Prime Minister? Is she right?
Well, I don't think necessarily about right or wrong in this kind of political circumstance. I really feel that what's happening currently in the climate is a purely anti-establishment vote. And if we had a left-leaning government, we'd be going right. And if we had a right-leaning government, which we do, we'd be going left. It's exactly the same what we've seen with Le Pen, and it's exactly the same what we've seen with Trump over in the States. And I really feel that regardless of what the policies are at the moment, people just feel like they need to vote for change, which is exactly the reason why Brexit came up through and exactly the reason why Corbyn's writing up in the polls at the moment.
Do you think, I mean, is that part of Corbyn's appeal, the fact that he is so anti-establishment?
I don't think so. I think it's essentially Theresa May is making her own demise with just being such a hard blue. And, you know, the general population really feel at this moment in time they need a government which are going to support them. And Corbyn is appealing to the younger generation. And at this moment, without even doing anything, they've appealed to the elder generation because the Conservatives have gone such a hard and fast right turn on social care that kind of policy is just going to be a demise of any kind of government. And I genuinely feel that in this current circumstance, a leader like Corbyn, without strength through power, without strength through, you know, oppression, is actually the kind of a leadership we need. My personal opinion.
No, I get you. No. I mean, look, you know, Corbyn has had a very good week, and whatever's written about his former links with the IRA, and he won't denounce them and all the rest of it, I guess the point is we all knew that about him anyway. But he does seem to be enjoying the campaign trail more than any other leader at the moment. Scott, do you think, I mean, is it your feeling, Scott, that this narrowing in the polls that we've seen could continue over the next 17 days?
I certainly feel so. And if it's definitely not over the next 17 days, it will definitely be over the next decade, as there definitely seems to be a rising in the liberal mentality in regards to social care. We're not necessarily talking about a hard and fast immigration policy in regards to humanity care, in regards to overseas budgets, blah, 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 etc. But more just in the fact that if you're at home, there should be a domestic policy which makes sure that the people that have worked hard for their lives are not going to be let down at the moment that matters the most. And Corbyn is appealing to that kind of demographic, which seems to be rife with young people especially.
But he's U-turned as well, Scott, hasn't he? 33 years he opposed Britain's membership of the European Club. Referendum comes along and he backs Remain. So he has U-turned as well.
Well, generally speaking, though, about the European Union, and to be honest, I was very on the fence with this, and I must admit your YouTube videos definitely swayed me towards a Leave vote. I must admit I voted Remain purely for the fact that I think that bridges are built and they shouldn't be burned. And in regards to, politics in this kind of circumstance, and especially economics, that as a stronger country, we should be together. But I am not saying that we should be united together, but we should definitely be working with the people that
Scott, we're not going to rerun the referendum here, but I would argue that we've escaped from a burning building. Scott, I thank you very much for your call, and I go to Hazel in Sandhurst. Hazel, good evening.
Hello, Nigel. We spoke last week when I was livid about all of this.
Yes. So how do you feel now?
Just the same.
Go on. Explain.
Well, I mean, everyone's entitled to change their opinion, but this, I mean, it wasn't thought out originally. The thing is, with Theresa May and her party, they think they know what the public want, but it seems they haven't got a clue. Let them walk a mile in my shoes, or so many members of the public. What I would say, Nigel, from my humble background, which I told you about last call, I'm a child and family counsellor, and feelings and emotions run high, and they drive thoughts. And feelings are universal. Experiences are unique, and they just haven't got that. They just don't get it. And I still will not be voting for Theresa May and her party because she will still want to take my house that I have worked so hard to get. I live in the south of England, and potentially my house is worth about four and a half. You know what I'm trying to say?
450,000, not 4.5 million. 450,000. Is that what you're saying?
Rubbish and maths. That's precious to us.
I do. Hazel, I remember you calling in last Thursday and feeling very strongly about this, and it's very important to have you on here. But, I mean, what Theresa May has done today is she's directly appealing to people like you. She's saying, Hazel, in Sandhurst, I, the Prime Minister, am listening. So why are you not satisfied now?
It's too little, too late.
Too little, too late. She hasn't convinced you. Hazel, thank you ever so much for your call. Well, as I would have expected, a huge range of views and opinions here tonight. Mohammed from Bolton, Annie from Hastings, they think actually this will help Theresa May pick up some of that support that she's lost. My view is that when you make a decision, when you've thought it through, when you've made a manifesto commitment with just 3 weeks to go before an election, you expect to take some stick. It's how politics works. What you do is you double down, you make the argument, you turn public opinion around. I feel what we've seen today is an act of followership as opposed to an act of leadership.
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.